Hello humans, hello humans. Just so you know, I mean, when people rip these videos, they usually slice off the dates and try and pass them off as current, even a year from now, right? Anyway, so today we're going to discuss death and aliens, two really fun subjects. So it's rainy and nasty out there. Let me, no, that's the lights would be reflecting. Anyway, so I've got this video is basically to get a bunch of people off my case about telling them what I'm taking. Okay, and what they're referring to is I'm better. I look a lot more fit than I did when I died. I've really come back, and I'm still in the process. This is a multi-year process. I'm in the 6th year of recovery from dying of colon cancer and having a great surgery and big hunks of my guts taken out, that sort of thing. In order to look as fit as I am looking, required a lot of work, okay? So I get people that send me emails saying, hey, what are you taking, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, I can't really do that. I can tell you what I'm taking, but it's going to be dangerous for you, and you don't want to just have this knowledge and go take this shit expecting a certain level of results, because you need to know why you're taking it and what it's going to do, and how long to take it, etc., and what to take it in combination with. It's very complicated. What we're looking at is a process. This process is Hindu in origin, or Indian. It actually originated in the Caucasus Mountains, it is believed, and then came down the mountains and cut over into central India. And from there it flourished, okay, because it was adopted by the yogis as being something worthwhile. And this process is this Kailasha Anta, which means end of time. It means end of time, okay? Kaila in Sanskrit is time. A very particular kind of understanding of the word time. From this, so the end of time process is very voluminous when you really get into understanding what you're looking at here, and it's systematized, and I think it goes back maybe 5 or 6 or 7,000 years to when they had the leisure to sit there and go through all of this stuff, systematize it, and develop it, okay? And maybe they inherited it from a previous, more aware civilization. Anyway, it is a process. And within that process, there are other subsets. I'm using some of those other subsets, okay? This whole end of time process involves meditation. It involves really esoteric stuff. I mean, really esoteric stuff that most people would just say, what the fuck? Anyway, so within that is this death of all deaths. This Marana, okay? That's death of deaths. With the SYA on there, it means all deaths, the ultimate all deaths, right? Within that part of the process at this level, you get people that do some really pretty strange things in terms of what they do to their bodies, and it also leads over to Sokyushin Butsu, which is the Japanese Buddhist process that derives from this Hindu process, but these people went and took it into an extreme level, and it's like self-mummification. You do all this stuff to basically shrink yourself down to those essence of cells, and then you die. And you leave behind a perfectly preserved mummy that's never been treated, right? Has no tannins or any of the other stuff put in it to preserve the body. You do it that way in the process of dying. There's also, now on the Hindu side of that, are the people that shrink their body down, and then they put them into basically kind of a crate, and at the very end of their life. You've got to do it before they die, this part of the process. And then they take a pure copper rod with a big point on the end of it and drive it right down through their spine. and it frees kills them, obviously, but it frees their vibration, they're assuming, from recycling into another birth. It doesn't work that way. They're going to be quite shocked when they actually do die and going up and find out that they're only one of 12 doers in the body for that being. For this being, we're only 1/12. So it's going to be kind of a shock for them. Anyway, okay, so what I am doing is this process here. Okay, it's the little version of this. It's not this big thing ending up with trying to fix my vibrations in place in a particular spot in universe or anything. None of that level of esoteric stuff that you get up in here. Okay, so I'm doing this death of deaths, lowercase, right? Lowercase d. So just so we're sure about this. So it's meaningful because this is all within the body, and all up in here is mostly not. This is analogous to this process here. Kayat kalpa, okay? The kal again referring to time. This is body repair or body transmogrification over time, okay? That's the subset of this process here that from which this subset developed. All right, this one actually comes from a lineage this way. This goes down this way because their intent is slightly different, right? Now, here's our problem. Being in the modern world here, we find ourselves in a highly polluted environment, and we take on all of these kind of pollutions. So in my opinion, it's going to be very difficult for us to pursue any of these more pure approaches to things. Microplastics and all this kind of stuff, that it's going to be difficult to get the purity of vibration that is necessary to achieve these kind of states. Now, on top of that, though, okay, so these process here, the death of deaths and the body transmogrification, meaning turn inside out, rebuild from the inside out, right? Not merely transform or make young again or whatever, but like truly renew. This one here, they want you to renew by, and both of them involve systematic preparation, poisoning, and then propagation. Now, here's the kind of cool part, okay? This shit's well documented in all these ancient yogic and other esoteric texts. So you can find all this information out there, especially if you know how to use good AI, right? And you can have it do a lot of the searching for you, report these results, and you can do some of the correlation. And I'm using it for a different purpose because I already knew where to find a lot of this information, having been in yoga since I was like 10 years old. And getting into it in Europe during the period of time right after the reshuffling of all of the... So there were a lot of Hindus, there were a lot of Turks, Egyptians, all different kinds of people in Germany at the time I was there. So there were all of these other cultural influences basically at the level I operated at, right? I knew Turkish street vendors that I could talk yoga with, you know? So anyway, you get these just incredible Turkish halva sweets, just sesame seeds, honey, and all different kinds of cool stuff. Anyway, so these processes here are what subsets of these I'm using to rebuild my body. It's not easy. It's very tedious. You have to know what you're doing. You have to time it. You have to be aware of it on a day by day by day by day basis. You have to live in the now mostly all the time. And you have to experience what's going on all the time. And it can be quite tedious, right? In the actual processes themselves, you take poisons. The idea of this is the ultimate in detox. But the poisons are not like broad, crude poisons. These are these are elegant throughout your body in order that you could do repropagation of those cells with a whole new crew. And in that sense, they're trying to encourage stem cell growth and stem cell repopulation in specific systems as you go forward. The knowledge that they have is considerable, deep, even though the way they're expressing it is not as we express it now. But we have AI. So what I've been doing is, and you would not believe the warehouse full of material I have here, okay? And this is part of the problem once you get into this. This whole thing here, in either of them, the death of deaths or the body transmogrification, you should have seclusion, you should have the proper preparation, and you should have guidance, okay? This in both in the Hindu as well as up into the Japanese side of these things in the ancient past. A person going through this would have at least two people that had already gone through it themselves in order to be guides, and that was one of the conditions. So this all stems from the end of time secret society, okay, which has no membership role. It's the goofiest kind of secret society there is. I came across it through the Japanese Association, through martial arts, and then I found it later in the world, greater world of Hindu mysticism. But anyway, so the goal of all of this, all right, so let me back up a bit, because there's many different goals in the whole process here, okay? But the way that all of this works is a systematic destruction of the body in order to rebuild the body. I had that systematic destruction of my body, had to take specific poisons in order to trigger this shit off, right? That's part of the problem here. We now have AI that can go through and get the preparation aspects here. We don't have guides. That's why I'm saying you need guidance. Right? You need somebody who's been through the process. Usually you have two, if not three or more. And they guide you through 6 or 8 months. You're supposed to, when you join this society and you go through this process, they stick you into a hut. You're there for anywhere from 6 months to maybe 18 months, depending on how your body is and so on. But you commit to doing a session for someone else as a result of having survived it. A lot of people don't. The death rate on this, most of the people showing up for this are near death anyway, because otherwise what would motivate them to something this extreme, right? Consistently taking poisons to bring you right close to the edge and then fighting your way back, all of that kind of shit. So anyway, so we don't have that structure anymore. It still exists in some places, in Japan and also in India. Okay, but I don't have benefit of it. So what I'm doing, and they threw me back from being dead. The other parts of my greater being out there in the woo said, no, you got work to do, here you go, and they chucked me back. And I was in a miserable state. I decided, and I knew the space aliens were coming, so I decided I had to get fit so that I could participate in a meaningful way with this, and not just be some, shrunken down guy in a wheelchair kind of thing, right? Okay, so I knew about the process existing, and I got into it in a serious way. I came on down and saw the level of preparation, and I started acquiring all of this stuff, and I ended up with this warehouse full of, you would not believe how many different kinds and so forth of supplements and herbs and so on, right? Because this is very, very, very lengthy and very detailed, but there's all these different elements of risk that come into it. So we have a formula. The formula says that if you take this particular poison, it'll kill off. You have to do it in a particular way, right? So basically, because you're doing massive detox, you've got to guard your liver. You've got to keep guarding your liver continuously throughout this entire process. So the very first thing you do is you build your liver up, and then you've got to keep guarding it because it's going to be in control of all of the chemical processes and so on that go through your body. But what this whole thing is intended to do, especially with the poisons, is to trigger particular kinds of pathways. So they'll get a lot of near-dead cells to die off, and you'll lose a lot of weight very rapidly and so on. And then at some different point, you take another kind of a poison and, vast quantities of your skin slough off. That's why they stick you into a hut with no windows or anything at that point, and sheets and sheets and sheets of cloth over the door, because you lose the protection of the eyelids in terms of for UV light and so on. It's an excruciating process to go through this thing, full on. Supposedly it's worth it if you survive it, and I say not many do. We don't know how many actually end up doing this, but there's, the consistent rumors, and there's the histories of some people that have done it, and some people in the esoteric community have written about it in their own journals, and some of these other people like Gurdjieff and some of the more intense mystic kind of people read about it and discussed it or discovered it, right? Not that they practiced it, but they were aware that these kind of things were going on because people would write about their experiences in doing this. And as I say, it's not an easy kind of a process. But now, from our current knowledge, we know that you want to systemically kill off, or you want to kill off specific systems in an orderly fashion. But before you do that, you want to have preparations in your body to deal with the poison that you're going to be taking at a particular point in the poisoning process such that it stops. So there's all of that kind of stuff. And then you want to have preparations already ongoing in your body for the rebuild process such that those can be used right at that point. And a lot of this is all, now we know, all involved with particular biological, biochemical pathways. And so, we can systematize it even further, much more so than reading about the formula and the preparations within these various different sources. Some of which are like yogic manuals. They're really straightforward. Others are hymns, that kind of thing, right? Anyway, now though, we also have the cross-checking ability of AI, because we can get these formulas and we can run the list of herbs and so forth through the okay. Sorry about that. This is going to be in 2 parts. We're getting on another storm coming, so that keeps intruding. But I'm assuming 2 parts. Hopefully I won't get another phone call and we can just finish this up. Anyway, so as I was saying, that what I'm doing is I'm using AI to go through the formula that you derive from this here in order to determine the various biochemical pathways that were being triggered and what their intent was. And then there's all of the timing aspects, how you do it in a particular order and all of this sort of thing, right? We could probably run that through AI as well. I haven't done that to suss this out. Now, bear in mind, I'm not doing the poisoning process in that sense, right? And so I'd had a lot of damage, and I just was interested in the rebuild process, which itself is quite tedious because you have to have certain levels of preparation before you trigger certain pathways. Otherwise, it's a real problem. And I'm also dealing with impacts on my gut, so impacts on digestion. Thus, I've had to do, and then on top of all of that, then there's the issue of the formula, including herbs. You've got to suss out the names of all of these things very carefully because a lot of plants were identified by the same name and it changed over time. And you can get in some real problems because a lot of these things are, the plants themselves are poisonous unless they're treated in a particular way prior to ingestion, right? So there's a variance that way. And then, do we have those species of plants now that have the same level of qualities? Because a lot of the plants we're dealing with now do not, because they're growing up in the same kind of environment that we are, right? The chemtrails, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is, it's very complicated stuff. So I'm using AI to do some level of reconciliation of all of this, to locate the pathways that these formulas seem to imply. Once we've got the components of that formula locked down in a near realistic fashion relative to the multiplicity of names for the various components in the various languages changing over time. You see, it's not that easy, right? So I've got a lot of stuff here and then on top of that, okay, let me back up a bit. On top of that, when you actually start experimenting with taking these plants and so on in the way in which they're supposed to be formulated, a lot of the formulas I've thrown away because I understand using AI what pathways are intended to be invoked, and I can get to those pathways in a different manner that's not quite as tedious, right? Because we have a different approach to a lot of these things. So I've made my own adjustments to the formulas, and you know, it's working, right? I'm satisfied with it. I'm proceeding. I expect to take another, maybe another 10 years in this process. Because I'm not doing it the way that they were doing it, which was fairly rapid, by forcing your body to react to, you know, the sudden die-off of, say, 60% of all the nerve cells, right? That some of this stuff was just excruciating to read about. Yeah, I won't go into it. No need to tell you the horror stories I ran across in doing the research on this. But anyway, so I'm doing a death of deaths process. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of smarts. It takes a lot of endurance and the willingness to endure internal pain as you take these things in order to produce specific effects, and so on. It's not like you're going to take detox, right? But this is like some of these things, you take it and you might be up 10 or 12 times that night throwing up, and that's the designed process because of what you're going to be throwing up, right? It's not as goofy as it sounds on the surface, on the face of it. Mostly I don't do those kind of violent level things. I did initially in order to be sure that I was like removing those things that would be early part of summer in 2019. I get my formula down. I'm starting to get sleep again, albeit interrupted because of the shortening of the bowel, etc. But at that point, I decided, okay, I'm going to pursue the rest of it, and started going at it systematically. Found out that these people here I got some good research into it. This is pre-AI, and this is also when I was being harassed by butthead Corey Good with his lawsuit. So I had to divert and do lawsuit shit, which slowed me down even further. But nonetheless, I was able to pursue. I came up with this process. And it's relatively straightforward. You go and you find the formulas, and then you do a reconciliation on the plant names. A lot of them are real straightforward. They haven't changed. You know, the plant identified in Sanskrit is basically the same plant identified in Hindi or Pali. The languages are, even though they may be separated by a couple of thousand years, are essentially holding the same information over time. And then you can see and then you get a listing of, a lot of these plants have been heavily researched. So that it's known by, you know, it's already in many, many, many different databases as to what pathways these things may trigger, because a lot of pharmaceutical companies are desperately trying to actually get products that work and make money as a result of finding these products, right? So they need to know. And where do they go? They go to traditional medicine, because there are no other medicine sources than what we find within our common shared reality that we call planet Earth, right? It's not like there's ever been a successful synthetic medicine. So some of the most popular ones, like the diazepides, right? They sell more of those calming agents, you know, lorazepam and all of those kind of things. Then, I mean, they're making a fortune on those, right? That formula is a bastardization of a chemical that's extracted from magnolia bark. And they take that chemical formula for the magnolia bark element, which is called honokiol, and they take that and they add nitrogen and hydrogen, and all of a sudden it's addictive, and they sell it to you. But the natural form is not addictive, and it does the same thing: neuroprotective, calming, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so I really got into a lot of this. Was life-changing because it killed me, and thereafter I was not interested in the same kind of things I had been before, and I had a different view of reality, and so I started getting into a lot of this stuff, right? And now I come up to the point of the, you know, getting into the ontology aspect of it all, and the space aliens. Okay, so everybody's clear here. I'm not going to tell you specifically what I'm taking, because it wouldn't do you guys any good. I'm taking it for a specific purpose at a specific time. A lot of it is injurious to other purposes at other times if inappropriately taken. And so, so this is much more medicinal than you might think of as like bodybuilding supplementation, right? Because I had to rebuild my body, and thereafter I could sit up here and, add some bulk, that kind of thing. And for that, I'm doing, a whey shake, right? Only in my whey shake, I add things to affect various different body systems at various different times, and it changes over time as to what I'm adding. So it's not like it's consistent. I'm not taking the same things now that I did when I started, and I presume I will not be taking these same things consistently, 6 months from now. There are a lot of things that are consistent. I take between 3 and 9 grams of vitamin C every day. My vitamin D every day with K2, vitamin E, etc. This is all in the idea of preparation. The idea for this whole process is detox through the poisons, and then you got to get rid of the poisons themselves, or at least have these other systems set up to block them when certain events happen. So detox through poisons, and then rebuild your body with new stem cells and so on. In order to do the rebuild, you've got to have the stuff in there to do have the body be able to activate to create those stem cells and send them where they need to go. And then the process for conversion. And so it's sort of like straight up supplementation, but the preparation, you have to know when to take it and basically when you don't need it anymore, right? When you've reached a certain level of saturation and so on. And so it can't be systematized to lay out for every person's body, although every person could do it with their own body if they were aware enough to, to pay attention to what's happening to them. A lot of people, as we know, wouldn't, but I would not want to put out a lot of these things because, as I say, they do include this element. It was necessary for my rebuild that I go through this process. This is one of the reasons, by the way, that I bitch at people like Carrie Cassidy with her saying we're all being turned into Borg because of silicon in our bodies. And she doesn't realize how incredibly necessary silicon is. Silica, okay? It's a necessary mineral on the planet. They use it in more than just photovoltaics. It's used in your body to mediate calcium. So if you've got lots of calcium but no silica in your body, you can't heal your bones, not effectively. It'll leave bone scars, a very telling situation. If you go to a grave site, which they did in Egypt, and they find bones that had been broken, and then when they healed up, they had scars and the bones themselves were like knitted poorly together, that's a sign of very low silica relative to the calcium in your diet, not calcium deprivation, as so many numbnuts academicians say, right? It's not calcium deprivation, it's the lack of the silica to moderate the uptake of the calcium. So we need silica in our body, and so Carrie Cassidy thinking silica and silicon is bad for our body is kind of silly. And in fact, silica, a necessary element, you're born with tons of it in your body that degrades over time because it's not that easily replaced in your diet. You can't go on out and just like chew sand and get silica, right? Or extract it out of, crunching on seashells, that sort of thing. It doesn't work that way, but you can easily take it as an ionic silica. It looks basically like water. It's like colloidal silica. And you replace that, and it's really an anti-aging longevity kind of a thing. Because here's the deal. All of your muscles are held together with this stuff called the fascia. It's 90% collagen. Collagen is very heavily dependent on silica because silica is the binding agent within collagen that holds the structure of all of your muscles together and allows you to move smoothly and so on. And if you get to a point where your body, when you're aging, and you have grit in the morning when you get up, not only trashing my digestion, but also destabilizing the biochemistry to where calcium absorption and silica use was degraded, okay? And so, but if you get up and you have grit in the joints and it feels like there's literally sand in there, it's actually the lack of silica that's causing you to feel that way. I won't go into the specifics of how those receptors and stuff work, but if you investigate it, and you can try fixing this yourself by buying I think it's like $6 or $7 for a thing of colloidal silica on silica water. You get that, you take a teaspoon in the morning and mix it in with fruit juice or just take it or whatever. And over probably about 3 to 4 weeks, you should feel that there's been a huge lessening of the grit, and getting up is easier, movement is easier, the joints are starting to heal and repair, right? Also, you may find that there's other ancillary effects in having better uptake of the calcium. But here's what you have to understand. Okay, so getting back to this kind of a process here, just like with the silica, if you're terribly, terribly deficient in silica, then you will have deficiencies relative to the calcium ions in your body. Ergo, when you start replacing the silica, all of a sudden the calcium gets like really agitated and shit happens relative to the calcium. And it may cause you to have a calcium drawdown. So you need to gulp more milk, right? And then that, because you've got the calcium there, raises the ratio you need of silica, so you have to have extra silica during that period of time when all this flushing is going on. That's what it's called, is something proximate flushing, okay? And what they're doing is the body is actually sort of rocking back and forth in ratios at a biochemical level in order to mediate them all and get all your needs met relative to the two substances or more that have a common goal and a common interconnectedness that can cause competition within the body itself when they get too depleted. All this stuff's so interrelated, right? So these things can be related to things like kidney stones, calcium problems, right? All of these things all go back to the silica if you have an improper relationship with the silica. If you get enough silica, you just piss out the stuff you don't need. So at some point, you've plumped up your silica receptors and your reservoirs, and you're okay. And you find that, of course, as you age, you don't have the capacity to store it the way you did when you were a kid, nor to retrieve it. But that gets back to the liver and keeping the liver going well. Anyway, though, and so you get to a habit of just taking in enough that you're certain that you're getting what you need for that day's use, and then some, right? Even though you won't necessarily store it the way you used to. Anyway, so that's the diversion into this stuff here at this point. Two of these. Okay, so now one last thing I wanted to get into was the space aliens. And this kind of goes to the same subject anyway, because like I'm sitting there, this was maybe, I don't know, maybe 2021. And I was thinking, oh shit, because I was starting to have real success in terms of we'd gotten the product out, we destroyed a bunch of commercial grinders, figuring out how to do things, and so it's like, oh, okay, universe is telling me, hey, you did good with this one, and I didn't really want to get into the supplement business. That wasn't my goal. But it actually worked, and I saw all the other sleep aids, and it's like, oh my God, these people are stupid. They're using melatonin and doing all this other stuff that's really going to fuck up your body because they don't understand that you need to use this nice, light, gentle touch and do it this particular way. And I started getting into all of this, and then it dawned on me, okay, at some point I'm going to have to talk about it. Well, it's going to be, because it becomes obvious. If you don't look as bad and wasted and destroyed by disease, people might notice. Maybe. And so I figured I had to be prepared for it all. And so this is basically to get everybody off my case, because I'm not going to give you a list of supplements. I can tell you that there's another one of the chemtrail jets. I can tell you that the process involves basically what it involves is preparation, which is the taking in of all of the resources that your body's going to need. And then it is the propagation process, which is the taking in of the tonics that then trigger the biopathways that then use up the resources in the preparation. This is true even with when you take the poisons, because a lot of these processes, like, the formula would have X amount of arsenic in it, right? Poison. or plants that would have cyanide in them, right? Cyanide basically being extracted from certain seeds in these poison elixirs that you would be taking. But you would, as a part of that process, have had preparation that would load your body up with specific things that were resistant to the poison, that would allow it to work to a certain extent, and then would overwhelm the poison, and it would get flushed out from your system. Not a good Saturday afternoon kind of a thing to do. But it's basically the same process. If we just eliminate the poison aspect of it in here, the process is you have to figure out what your body is going to be needing, and you have to provide it in the form of the raw materials, right? Your vitamins and certain other compounds like the cyanin groups, all of the plant compounds that have the blue or green or blue purple color in them. They're very, 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 very useful. So I use like the huckleberries out here. If I had elderberries, I could use those. You could use amla if you were in India, to get the gooseberries. And then you make tonics out of these. Usually not using alcohol. One of the things about this process, by the way, is that in the preparation and so on, the only part of this that has any aspect of alcohol in its use is the preparation of the poisons. And some of the poisons include things like mercury and other things. Not good stuff, guys. And if you don't know what you're doing, you wouldn't want to mess with any of it anyway. And these days, we don't need to use a lot of these techniques because we have much finer degree of understanding of these biochemical pathways. And once you understand what they're trying to trigger off in your body with that particular poison, you can get at it another way. So anyway, though, so the idea in this is that you get the stuff in you, and then you take specific tonics in specific ratios to each other across time with like a pattern, a designed pattern, but there's a feedback process from your body, and then you end up being able to rebuild. And so I'm in the process now of eating a lot of protein and stuff, right, in order to bulk up. And my diet's very restricted because of the so that adds another layer of complexity, but nonetheless, so I bulk up and then I cut back down, bulk up and cut down, because that's part of the process that I'm in now, and I'll probably do that for another 6 or 8 months. It's indeterminate at this point. I have to reach certain goals in terms of strength and so on. Anyway, so one of the things was, like I was saying, I wanted to do all of this so I'd be in good shape to help deal with the space aliens. Now we're there, right? They did the Congress hearing where they came out and they said, hey, space aliens they're NHI, non-human intelligence. They're fucking real. So the NHI are here, and government's having to deal with them. And personally, I don't trust government, right? I don't think these people think very deeply. And I don't think they listen to very many people who do think deeply. And this is going to be one of those cases where we have to have people that do think very, very, very deep in order to be able to be sure that we're on a good footing in dealing with non-human intelligence. One thing we know for sure is they're not here in a diesel engine, right? They're not here to tank up. So that being the case, we know that they're using the O physics, the ontologically based understanding of our universe, of physics based on that understanding, not physics based on Einstein. And they're probably not going to be very... Okay, so there's some conclusions we can make based on the activity that's going on now relative to UFOs. And then there's even more conclusions that we can make based on the activity of government relative to UFOs. And both the timing of the activity that government is doing and the type of activity that they're doing and the people involved. So now it's something that came out in the hearing just by all of the witnesses talking, is that there's a preponderance of people within government dealing with the UFO issue. It applies to many different disciplines within government thinking, but nonetheless, that's kind of unique or kind of interesting. I would have expected intelligence services, but maybe, DARPA, right? In any event, though, so getting around that particular little odd wrinkle, we have the alien issue showing up now, as well as lots and lots and lots of UFO reports, and then also now the reports in recent years of the motherships releasing the drones. And we're going to have consternation, I think, difficulty conceptually within government to deal with what's going to unfold relative to these non-human intelligences being here. Also, coincidentally, they've had an announcement where they've announced these giant space tunnels between galaxies and stuff. These are the galactic interweb that I was referring to in last couple of months. This discovery of that they were going to discover a new form of a galactic interweb that would go to the idea of the Akashic records and so on. So I don't think that the scientists that are describing these structures in space quite understand what they're looking at in terms of their data. And even if they think they do, our understanding of all this stuff is going to evolve over time as we get into the necessary discussion about the failure of human understanding relative to the non-human intelligences that we now have to, with whom we now have to interact. Because they're here, and they're going to be more here in a more open and forceful way relatively soon for their own purposes, and we need to get our understanding of things more nailed down, right? We need to get a better, clearer picture of our universe, where we fit into it and where they fit into it, and because we're going to be dealing with them, right? Can't avoid it, especially if they're coming here for some reason. And I don't believe they're coming here to help us out. And it would also be unwise for us to ever think that. So I don't have much, I don't interact with woo people that have the external savior myth attached to space aliens. Space aliens don't give a shit about us. They wouldn't care. They're here for their own purposes, probably because of stuff that we did to annoy them. Because I'm quite sure we are annoying. Anyway, though, so this is going to escalate seriously the UFO stuff really quick now that we've reached this particular threshold, and now that the government's had to admit that they're real, it's going to slowly start dawning on a lot of normies, the cascading chain from that, right? Which were really government, et cetera, the woo history of all of this, and all of the ramifications of them having to admit that these people are real, okay? And then here's the follow-on to that. Government is very desperately, desperately, desperately afraid of this information getting out. One of the reasons, they cite the potential for humans to be buttheads and blow the planet to shit using this technology, okay? And there may be some small justification for their thinking that. However, there's also a much different perspective to be gained when you think about this. If you have a little box, the size of a small sewing machine or something, or a cooler, a small cooler to take on a tailgate thing, that kind of a deal. And that's your 0-point energy, and it also provides you with anti-gravity as a side effect. And you could put it into your RV and lift your RV up and go fly anywhere you want. You're a sovereign individual at that point. You got free energy, and you got free location anywhere in the fucking universe. At that point, government can't do anything to you. You can do anything you want with the capacity of the anti-gravity and the 0-point energy. And you can basically tell government to go piss off. So there's a big aspect of, oh my God, we can't control the herd at all once this technology comes out. And then there's the other aspect of it, and that is that all of Earth, all of its assets, all of the money, all of the land, everything considered as currency and money and debt, all of that is tied to our existing system, which goes away when you have 0-point energy technology active, right? If I've got my little box with my 0-point technology that provides me with free energy for the rest of my life, and then whoever found it could have free energy all of their life, et cetera, at that point, it's like, you know, the ability for a company to sell oil goes away, to sell electricity goes away. They can't tax you if you're not, you know, tied into all of this. And if you can just, you know, if they come to try and tax you, and you can just, you know, put up an energy shield and like say fuck them, or hop in your RV and, you know, scoot to the other side of the moon, you know. So anyway, so the 0 point technology causes a lot of fucking problems for government. On the other, I mean, even on the other extreme of it, right? 0 point technology in reasonably sane, or reasonably insane, reasonably crazy minds like mine, the government isn't going to want me to have a floating RV that I could use to go and check out their shit in space, or to go and go to Mars. They don't want me doing that kind of shit. They're freaking out about it, right? Just the you know, what if there were 10 or 20,000, you know, old boomers like him, you know, that are loading up with barbecue and steaks and beer and shit and partying on Mars. So anyway, so it causes them some issues. You can see that that's the case. Anyway, guys, so I'm putting this up here so you can go research it if you want. If you have a desperate need, the ontology told me that at some point I'm going to have to tell people all of this. It's tedious beyond fuck, and I don't want to be responsible for any of you guys taking the poison aspect of this and croaking, right? That's because I can't be there to aid you in all. And that was part of the old style secret society shit here, right? You had to commit to doing at least one session for someone else in order that the knowledge propagates from generation to generation. And we don't have that now, so it's broken. So anyway, I don't want to be responsible for you killing your ass, so I'm not going to go into detail. But you can use these words here and go and research it yourself, and you can get into the formulas, and you can see what's going on. Now, it'll take you some time to figure it out, but it is possible to do this. And best of luck to you. And everybody's going to be different on it. And, you know, maybe the aliens are going to come here and we don't have to worry about it. Personally, I think we're going to be into some serious contention with them. But really, I think that the worst of it's going to be our contention with our own butt-headed government to get them out of the way in order that we can discuss things with these non-human intelligences. Because our government's going to make so many stupid assumptions. And it's going to get us into a world of hurt, I'm quite certain. Anyway, guys, I'll put both of these parts up here in a little bit. Okay, got to get stuff done.